Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler. There's Bugsy Malone. This is episode 253 or something like that of Tottenham Walks. How are you? We hope you are all happy and healthy doing the things you love with the people that you love doing them with. Please do me a favor, guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button for me on the video. Hit the subscribe on the channel. I think we're about to break 11,000 subscribers, which is absolutely madness. But we really appreciate all the support. So if you haven't hit the subscribe, please do. Join those that have gone before you. Welcome back to all of them. Welcome to the new. Here is today's transfer news, views and clues. Nothing to progress with regards to Tapsoba or Van der Ven thus far today. Where we have to pivot instead is to the Harry Kane saga and talk about what Christian Falk of CF Bayern, Twitter handle fame, the guy who works for the Bild in Germany, someone who I always had the impression in my mind was someone that was, quite respectable as a journalist. But the more I have read and looked into him, the more I keep reading that actually he is, another kind of clickbaity journo, but just a Bayern Munich focused one who focuses on German football. So maybe we can take it with more of a pinch of salt than I initially suggested a couple of weeks ago. And today he's been out again saying that Tottenham star Harry Kane has been in constant contact with Thomas Tuchel, Bayern Munich manager, all summer, that they talk regularly, that they've been texting regularly, and that Munich have turned the head of Harry Kane, that he's impressed with the project and that ultimately he wants to go. He, of course, hasn't yet asked for a transfer, but Falk is suggesting that maybe, Harry Kane will start to lean into Daniel Levy and put pressure on by, kind of enunciating the risk of losing him for free unless he lets him go this summer for the right price. The right price, we've heard in the last couple of days, could be that Bayern Munich will come back with something that looks around 90 million. Would that be enough to tempt Daniel Levy? I think it all depends on what Harry Kane's stance is. And as I say, really don't know whether or not to believe CF Bayern on the Twitter handle, Christian Falk. I don't know whether or not he's saying this with any kind of sincerity or whether he's just doing the usual media thing, but from the German side rather than the English side, and just pushing up the pressure to try and disrupt and unsettle Harry Kane. What you would like to think is that Harry Kane and Daniel Levy and Ange Postecoglou will have a meeting very, very soon. As soon as Harry Kane gets back from his break, which I imagine is probably next Monday. I think it'll be next Monday. It might even be a little bit later because, of course, he was participating in the late season internationals. And so we'll still be on his holiday, whereas a lot of the squad are already back. And I guess as soon as he's back, he needs to have a very clear heart-to-heart and sit down with the powers that be at Tottenham and figure out what he wants to do. But I do think that there needs to be, within that period, or within a relatively quick period after he arrives back, some sort of clarity, some sort of clarification from Harry Kane's part. Us not really knowing, nobody really knowing where he stands, whether he wants out or wants in. There's obviously not been any clear contract discussions. Neither has there been a transfer request. So it's very difficult to read the situation. Tottenham, of course, have, or would be foolish if they haven't, been thinking about life after Harry Kane. We mentioned on this channel was it last week? There was noise out from the guys at The Athletic saying that Tottenham, ever since the Man City saga, have been having various preparatory plans in place for life after Harry Kane that would have looked very different under Conte, very different under Ange Postecoglou because of the different styles and formations. But I'm guessing that they're constantly having those discussions. You would hope they are, regarding what to do. And one of those stories that is emerging this morning is that Tottenham might turn to 23-year-old Canadian international Jonathan David from Lille to replace him. Transfer market values him at 60 million euros, 65 million euros. The guy scored, I think it was 24 goals in the Ligue 1 last year with 4 assists. And look, a lot of people think he's a very special, talented player. I'm not one of them. If I'm entirely honest, again, it comes down to stats versus the seeing eye test, or when you look at the stats on paper, you have to bake in a lot of context for me to be able to see the wood for the trees. First and foremost, he stands at only 1 metre 75 inches tall, so he's 5'8.5", 5'9". He's quite a small striker. He's technically a centre forward / striker, although I personally think he is a better fit as an attacking midfielder. The reason I don't particularly like him is because I think he relies on one set of skills to get himself out of trouble that another set of inadequacies get him into. I think his first touch is very heavy. I think he can walk into trouble. He's head down when he dribbles, and he's quite good with close control, so he can get himself out of trouble by kind of figuring it out with drag backs and flicks and all of that sort of thing, where he can get himself out of predicaments. But his head down nature when he receives the ball gets himself into trouble because I think his first touch is poor, and that reminds me quite a lot of Richarlison. Now, the main difference between Richarlison and Jonathan David is the goal scores. He scored 24 goals last year, but if you actually look into it, he scored, I think it was 10 penalties. And I'm not saying that you take away those goals because penalties still count as goals, but it just bakes in a little bit of context. If you don't look at that and don't kind of respect that statistic, then you might be under the impression that he's going to give you a goal or an assist more than twice in every 3 games. A really, really ridiculously healthy record. But you take away the penalties and you look at the XG of what's left over. A lot of the goals that he scored, you can make the argument with Tommy Tappins. Doesn't really score too many worldies. I just think that his valuation is artificially pumped a lot higher than it would otherwise be because of his goal scoring record last year. But I just don't think he's that great of a footballer. I really don't. I think he's like a kid on the playground, gets the ball and puts his head down. Always his first thought is to run with it. It reminds me a lot of Richarlison, and you know how I feel about Richarlison. I don't think he's particularly fast. Like, he's got quick feet, but I don't think he's particularly pacey for a small guy. He's not going to offer too much in the air because he's of his height. And, you know, he dominated in the French league. Lille came, I think, 5th or 6th in the French league last year. But also, I did watch the World Cup, and I was massively unimpressed and underwhelmed by him in the World Cup. I was reading today as well that Manchester United are also obviously looking for a striker right now. They've had their scouts go and take a look at Jonathan David, and they walked away incredibly underwhelmed. It depends on the valuation. If you're going to get the player in at a certain valuation, then of course there's a higher probability to see a better return on your money. But if the transfer market stats are to be believed, that he is valued at 65 and it's a peak valuation right now, then you would imagine that that's going to cost you more than that, maybe 70, 75 million. And if you're spending basically 80% of your Harry Kane budget on Jonathan David, I would be massively unimpressed with it. It's not a player that I particularly like. I'm sure that will offend a lot of you if you have a different opinion. You might say I'm mad, but listen, to each their own. I can only go on what I've seen and what I feel and my gut instinct on him. And I think that the stats tell one story, but the seeing eye test tells another. For what it's worth, he is in the top 80th or above percentile across the top 5 leagues for a lot of incidental statistics, like pass completions. But like I say, that if you actually look at the way that he plays, he's head down, he gets himself into trouble, finds a way to get out of trouble with some clever dribbling, and then will just release the ball short. So it's not like his role is requiring him to be pinging balls and creating stuff. too much. I'm unimpressed, but also I'd have to throw out the caveat that if Tottenham are going to get 90 million euros back on Harry Kane, it's going to be impossible to replace him. We all know that. There's no one out there that we are going to be able to get that is going to entirely replicate what Harry Kane brings to the table. I think all you can do is go as best you can in trying to find the player that will serve the purpose of Ange Postecoglou's system as best he can at the right valuation. And on that note, there's lots of players out there that might be achievable, acquirable for similar or less money than what Jonathan David is, and that could do a better job for the role that's needed. And that, to me, I mean, we've spoken about them before. We've looked at players like Evan Ferguson. We've looked at players like Rasmus Højlund, Dusan Vlahovic, who, by the way, I think a lot of people are writing off Vlahovic because he had a bit of a struggling start to life at Juventus. But I actually think that the system that Juventus play doesn't suit a player like Vlahovic at all under Allegri. And that if he was to come to Europe, I think someone like him could reignite his fire. Plus, of course, Juventus have financial issues. We know that Paratici's spinning plates and doing things in the background. Maybe, just maybe, there might be a conversation to be had there in a world where Harry Kane does in fact depart the club this summer. Look, guys, let me know your thoughts on Jonathan David. I'm sure a lot of you are going to say that I'm insane and that he's a brilliant player. I just don't see it. I think he's talented. I think he's creative. I think he's a good dribbler of the ball. And he's got an okay finish, but I haven't seen enough to think that he is worth anything like 65 million euros or more, which is what it would cost. And I think he's someone who his first thought is to put his head down, when I prefer players whose first thought is to put your head up. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Is there other players out there that you think we could go after? What about El Yawahi, if we're talking about the French League? Montpellier guy. He's a guy that would cost a fraction of what Jonathan David would. And for me, has a lot more interesting and exciting parts to his game. As I said, we've mentioned some players over in Italy. We missed out on the guy who's just gone to Chelsea. Wonderful player there. I think Chelsea will do really well with him and Nkunku. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, guys. Do you believe CF Bayern? Do you believe Christian Bulk that Harry Kane and Thomas Tuchel have been in cahoots all summer, having conversations? Do you think it's time that Harry Kane showed his cards as soon as he gets back from holiday? And are you hopeful that when he does get back from holiday and he sits down with Ange Postecoglou, that maybe, just maybe, Ange will turn on the charm and convince him to stay and sign, similar to what he's done with players like Vicario and Maddison, and for what it appears to be most players in the club, most staff in the club, who are really excited about the initial energy and the vibes of life at Tottenham under Ange Postecoglou. I don't know. It's a tricky one to read. I still think Harry Kane will stay at Tottenham, but maybe that's more with my heart than my head, because I'm not particularly excited about the prospect of not having him and having to spend the lion's share of the money we would get for him on players that don't particularly excite me. Like, subscribe and comment, guys. And as always, bye-bye.